What's going on, everybody? Zinny Dimes here with another video, and today I wanted to talk about the NBA trade deadline and how everything just passed, and we finally even have a lot of the bigger names signed from the waiver wire and all that, so I wanted to talk about all of those moves, and also just who I think won out of all of those trades and who I think is going to win the NBA title this season. So, I think a very underrated signing, or what did I say signing for? That wasn't what they did. But a very big trade that they did was actually trading for Rajon Rondo. The Clippers, of course, traded Lou Williams and 2 second-round picks to get Rajon Rondo, who I think is exactly the player that they needed. I'm no Clipper fan or anything like that, but I do think that Rondo is the player that they really did need to get this team to just, A, play more together in a more fluid offense, and finally they have a nice point guard that can create for others, and we all know about playoff Rondo at this point. And I just think that he's the type of guy that they needed to get. He's someone that is just one of the smartest players in NBA history. He knows all of the plays in every single team, it seems like, and he was literally a member of the Lakers last year that just won the championship. So he knows Frank Vogel, he knows the way he thinks, and Rajon Rondo was able to talk to LeBron James and Anthony Davis as well. So he's got a good grasp of that team and just all of the teams for that matter. And I do think that he could maybe hold Playoff P accountable to that name and try and just elevate everyone's game. Because I know that also the Clippers recently signed Lamarcus Cousins, which I think is a huge pickup as well, as they kind of did need at least one more big, in my opinion. And now they kind of have that with Cousins. Hopefully Boogie can kind of play back to form. I know he hasn't been too great this season, but he hasn't been awful by any stretch either. He's a very reliable big, in my opinion, in terms of scoring especially. And I think that team can just kind of have a much better offense with Rondo and with Cousins, and just, of course, they still have Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Luke Kennard, Serge Ibaka, and just the rest of them. Like, I think this is a really good team, and they might have actually had a very underrated pickup, and honestly, I want to see him play a little bit, of course, because he hasn't really been able to suit up for them just yet, but once that ends up happening, then I think that this team can really start to gel, especially come playoff time, and I think they're going to be a huge threat no matter who they're facing. So, especially with all of the injury concerns with both LeBron James and Anthony Davis, AD is who I'm most concerned about. With his injury history in general, I would be very worried if I was a Laker fan, but hopefully they're just going to keep it slow and just make sure that he's eased back into the offense and healthy. Because, of course, the Lakers should be considered the favorites to come out of the West if they were all healthy, but I just don't know how much of a guarantee that's going to be. So that's why I think that the Clippers now getting Rondo, I would really look out for them if I'm any team. I know that the Nuggets beat them last year, so you shouldn't count them out either, and they just traded for Aaron Gordon, and I think that was a huge pickup for them without a doubt. He's going to fit into this offense perfectly. Nikola Jokic and him are going to create a very dynamic scoring threat, and of course with Jamal Murray as well. That's just a very well-constructed team. They've got tons of players outside of that, and so I think Aaron Gordon is kind of like the Jeremy Grant replacement that they had last year, of course, where he's a great scorer and he's a more well-established name. I know that now Jeremy Grant is making a name for himself in Detroit, but Aaron Gordon I think is definitely just, everyone knows about him and just all of the offensive talent that he brings, where the athleticism and the three-point shot, and on top of that, he's a very great defender, so they have another person to throw at the likes of LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and just all the rest of the beasts of the West. And so I think that Aaron Gordon is a very big pickup for them, and I would never count out the number 1 seed. So the Utah Jazz are still one of the best teams without a doubt. They have a very high advantage in terms of net rating out of everyone. And they're just also, of course, one of the best defensive teams, and they've just had this same group of guys for a while now that they've really learned to build that chemistry and connection, and Donovan Mitchell is just playing outstanding, and they also have Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench, a 6th Man of the Year candidate for sure, and Rudy Gobert is doing his thing on the defensive end, and he's also improved a lot on the offensive end over the years. So they're just a very great team. Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles, Mike Conley, of course, was an all-star this year. And so Utah, you'd have to look out for them, but in a 7-game series, I just don't think they really have that experience, even though They've had some success, of course, but as much as I'd love to finally be someone on YouTube that supports the Jazz and thinks they're going to make a 2004 Pistons type run and just win the championship this year, I really don't think I could say that, especially not when you look out east and see that the Brooklyn Nets still exist. And not only do they still exist, but they have that big three that everyone knows, that three-headed monster, and then they were able to add Blake Griffin, and then they were able to add Lamarcus Aldridge. So I think that, truthfully, Brooklyn has to be considered the favorite to win the title this year, even though you haven't really been able to see them play together too much. That team is so good that, like, I just can't really see a scenario where they lose. Of course, Durant is also injured, but I'm pretty sure he'll be healthy by the time the playoffs come around, and hopefully that nothing is too serious there. And even without Kevin Durant, we've seen how good they were able to be. Spencer Dinwiddie might even return from his ACL injury. So with that all in mind, like, you can't count out Brooklyn by any stretch, and I just think that in a 7-game series, how are you going to beat this team 4 times? You'd have to just completely lock all of them up, and I just don't really know if there's a team that could do that. Of course, Philadelphia has played tremendously this season. They were able to pick up George Hill, so Philly definitely has a shot for sure, but I just don't know if Philly can really do that. And of course, with Joel Embiid also being injured, he's looking a little bit better. He might be back pretty soon, but I don't know, maybe Philadelphia has a shot. Milwaukee also, I definitely think this year's Milwaukee team is a lot better than last year's and the years prior, because I just think that, one, Drew Holiday is an incredible pickup for them. He's providing a lot of great defense and just scoring in general. So, like, he's a very underrated player, and just maybe Milwaukee can make it out of the East. I wouldn't really count them out, but when you have Brooklyn, there's only so many players that can make a difference when it comes to guarding the likes of Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. And then with the rest of the group that they've got, of course, DeAndre Jordan has been playing pretty solid this season. They've got Joe Harris, a great shooter, and they still have Nicholas Claxton, who's looked great. I've always been a pretty big fan of him, and seeing his development, seeing the way that he's been able to play and just provide that energy and just spark off the bench, I think that he's a great addition to that team as well. And then, of course, they still have Lamarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, who both of them, even though, of course, neither one of them are as good as they used to be like a year or two ago. Lamarcus Aldridge, you're not going to get rid of that mid-range shot. You're not going to get rid of just all of the brilliance that he's got in his offensive game. And he's not the biggest rebounder or anything, but I think that he could kind of focus a little bit more on that and just the defensive end and provide a little bit more of what Brooklyn needs, because of course no one's questioning how great their offense is. They're literally one of the greatest offenses we've ever seen, if not the greatest potentially, especially with these new additions. We need to see how they all fit together, but you can't tell me that Lamarcus Aldridge isn't going to win a game or two in the playoffs, and same thing goes for Blake Griffin. Just especially when they're surrounded by these brilliant offensive players, a lot of the focus is going to be on them. So how are you going to just focus on Lamarcus Aldridge? Like he's literally potentially the 5th to even 6th scoring option on this team, and that is just mind-blowing to me. Like, I don't know how you could stop this team. So I think Brooklyn is probably the favorites, but at the same time, maybe the Clippers can give them a run for their money in the finals. Maybe the Lakers with Andre Drummond, of course, he was able to sign with the Lakers, so they have another great guy that can just completely dominate this team on the glass that could give them a chance. And with LeBron James, if he's healthy, then of course any team that he's on, regardless of the supporting cast that he's got, he's going to make a difference for sure. So this is just a wide open NBA season. I didn't even mention the Phoenix Suns, who are the 2 seed in the West, and they've got Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and that tandem has been working great. And DeAndre Ayton, I think, is the biggest X factor for them, as he's really the guy that is going to have to step up his game and elevate himself to really make the Suns a team to look out for. And he's been playing great. He's had a lot of growth on the defensive end especially, and he just kind of has to stop with those finesse shots that he's been doing. Like, when you watch their games, like, he's shooting a lot of hook shots and fadeaways and stuff like that, and that's great because for the long term, he really does need to develop those shots and make those unstoppable. But I just want to see DeAndre Ayton be a little bit more aggressive, actually go to the rim a little bit more, dunk on people a little bit more, and just kind of get that out of him. And I think that Chris Paul and Devin Booker are two pretty great playmakers that they've got over there. But it still seems a little bit early for them, even though Chris Paul is there. So, I don't know. Maybe Chris Paul is going to lead his team to a championship one year, and maybe that could be this year, because really anything is possible. Same thing can kind of be said for the Blazers, because Portland, I think, they just picked up Norman Powell, and they've got Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic just came back, and just Robert Covington is over there as well. And they've got Carmelo, shout out to Melo, one of the best players, one of my favorite players of all time as a Knicks fan. And so I would love it if Portland can make a run. And I mean, as a Knicks fan, I just want to give a slight shout out to them, but of course they're not going to win the championship or anything. But with Portland, they've got Dame Lillard, they've got CJ McCollum, who's looked incredible. Like, CJ is playing the best basketball of his career this year as well, when he's actually healthy, which now he's back, of course, so maybe they could get into a groove and just completely dominate everyone on the offensive end. And they're not the greatest defensive team by any stretch, but maybe they could make a run. I just think that this league is so wide open. The Boston Celtics, who knows, maybe they can kind of turn it on once playoff time comes around. They've already had some pretty good experience, even though Tatum is only like 22 and Jaylen Brown is only 24. Like, they've still got some pretty great experience in the playoffs. And Miami, who, oh my god, I didn't even mention them. They just traded a bag of Cheetos for Victor Oladipo, so they finally have another scoring threat that is also one of the best defenders in the league, and he's coming off of his injury as well, so there's a lot of injuries that are really going to play a role in these playoffs, as it always ends up happening, of course. But I think that the Heat, you really have to look out for them, too, because Miami, with Jimmy Butler, with Tyler Hero, with Bam Adebayo, with Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, when they get a guy like Victor Oladipo now, we're going to have to see how he fits into the offense, but that's just another guy that they could count on to score, and we've seen him lead that Pacers team to a great record overall, and they were able to push the Cavs to 7 that one year, and so like they have a guy like him now, and Victor Oladipo in this Miami culture, I'm sure is going to be more motivated than ever to really prove that he is no fluke. He is a guy that you need to consider for All-NBA, and having him with Jimmy Butler, who's shown that he could carry this team in the playoffs, and just, I think that Miami might actually be Brooklyn's biggest threat. It's kind of a toss-up, in my opinion, between Miami and Philly, where, I don't know, because I do think that, like, when you look at the two teams, does Miami have what it takes to edge out Philadelphia, or, of course, Brooklyn? Maybe. They might just have enough with Jimmy Butler and with all of the young guys that they've got, and now adding Victor Oladipo. Like, this is a team that you cannot count out, and I think that these playoffs are just going to be so fun to watch. There are so many great teams all over the league, where I'm just extremely excited as an NBA fan to finally, we're getting to that point where maybe it's going to happen pretty soon. Of course it is. That's a very set schedule, of course, but I don't know, it's just a great time to be an NBA fan, because even with that super team that Brooklyn's created, that's just another villain to root against. And if you're a Brooklyn fan, good for you. You kind of deserve it to a certain extent. That franchise has been through a lot, especially going back, like, personally, I think back to the days of when Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and them were traded, and just they traded all of their draft picks for them, and they still don't even have a title in franchise history. So I think that now might be the time for Brooklyn, but even if it's not, there are just so many other teams, and whoever's going to win this title is truly going to deserve it. It's been an incredible season to watch, and I can't wait for the rest of it, but thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Be sure to leave a like if you haven't already, and hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment down below on what you think about all of these deadline moves, and just who you think is the biggest threat in the NBA in general, because who is going to win this title? I don't really know. So also, if you haven't, you could hit that video over here that's somewhere in this general vicinity, because I've had a ton of videos already posted each week. So just stick with me, and thank you. Have a great life.